All right, please welcome to the stage Bob Lefsetz. Bob doesn't like to do any preparation, so I wasn't allowed to call him. I wasn't allowed to meet him backstage. So now we're talking for the first time. How are you?
Well, to tell you the truth, I got to talk about Prince. I just pulled up into the parking lot and I saw Ted Cohn, and he says, "What do you think?" And I look at my phone. And he was saying it'll be a matter of where were you when. And I have to tell this story a little bit. Prince was an overhyped phenom who lied about his age, who was signed to Warner Brothers Records. And the first album was a complete stiff after all that hype. Second album, For You, had a hit on this when the charts were really segmented on black radio. Third album came out, and it was called Dirty Mind. There was no radio action, there was nothing, but that album got a review in Rolling Stone, and Rolling Stone still counted that if you read the review, you say, I have to go buy the fucking record, okay? I bought the record and dropped the needle. It was dance music. If you go back and listen to Dirty Mind, this guy was an R&B guy on the second record, billed as a rock guy. This was dance music through and through. When every rocker hated disco, you know, Uptown, if you know that song, which is actually about a neighborhood in Minnesota, unbelievable. Maybe the most rock song was When You Were Mine. And I went to see him. For those of you old enough to know, you'll remember that Reagan was shot by Squeaky Fromm, and they delayed the Oscars one night. And Prince was booked the following night when they had the Oscars at a place called Flipper's Roller Disco, which was at La Cienega. The building still stands. Actually, it's a replacement building, but it's still location. It's a drugstore now. And I went there. There maybe were 70 people there. And he did the full-on show, jumping on the bed, et cetera, et cetera. So that was at a time before the dance music that we're talking about, emanated from Chicago. So he was really there at the beginning. And you also want to say in terms of dance music that it was interesting for those of you living in America, you remember Steve Dahl, a DJ in Chicago, blew up disco records and supposedly killed disco. Disco never died. We just changed the name, and dance music has been everywhere. So I'm still in shock about the Prince thing, to be honest.
I actually I'm so old that I actually used to play records in the soul and jazz funk era when Prince was our god almost. From that first album, it was just as long as We're Together was the song. And I remember buying the first album. Actually, we used to cover up the label and put a white sticker over the top of it so no one knew what you were playing. And that's the way it started with Prince. And I was a hero in my own town because I had the coolest record by Prince. So anyway, big love affair. Bob, 5 years ago this week, in fact, we sat down to have a conversation at a pop-up we did at Coachella at the night before it started that year. And EDM was it was exploding. DJ culture was exploding. Pretend you're a doctor for the moment and I'm your patient, EDM, and I've just walked in to see you for a checkup. How are we doing, 2016?
Well, you're doing great. If we want to go back to that time in the desert at the Ace Hotel, everybody from the EDM world was freaking out about the roll-up, okay, with Sillerman and Live Nation. Oh, they're coming into our territory. They're coming into our business. They're going to really fuck it up. And then a year later, I was in Ibiza with you guys. Everybody had sold out. It was like hysterical. Okay, so I think the number one thing, if we want to use a term that I hate, and I'm not going to use it, electronic music has a branding issue. Okay, first and foremost, I thought the guy from Billboard, he's made some very good points. Who gives a shit what they call it? EDM, electronic music, that's not what it's about. But what happened was the press amplified it to such a point, and the press is always wrong. Madonna's tour is a failure. U2 did not go clean in every market. When you look at these major media, Brian Johnson does not have a hearing problem in AC/DC, okay? These are all false stories. So all of a sudden you had electronic music and it was boosted by the mainstream media. Then Sillerman started rolling up these companies and everybody said, and don't forget, it became a money story, okay? And then Sillerman falters, which everybody in this room, I haven't talked to everybody, but the traditional person IMS was rooting for. And then all of a sudden it came and it stained the rest of the business. Now, the examples I would use are Coachella versus EDC. Electric Daisy Carnival had, of course, a huge problem in Los Angeles with the Coliseum. You know, whether they'll ultimately have any liability, it looks like not. But they left for Las Vegas, where when people die, it's okay. Okay. And Gary Richards, you know, he had the Hard Music Festival. They've had a few things in Southern California where people have not turned out so well. So that's in question. So what do we know? Over this past weekend and the next weekend, Coachella is dominating all the entertainment news. It's a fascinating story because it's become more of a cultural story than a musical story. More people go to the Electric Daisy Carnival than go to Coachella. Okay? In addition, you don't get the wankers who would just want to be seen. It's really the fans who go, because it's not so easy. You got to go to Vegas, you got to schlep out to the racetrack, etc. But it gets a fraction of the press. Okay? Now, we can talk about DJ fees going down, et cetera, and maybe there was a correction that way. But in terms of fan support, it is huge. If we go back to Coachella, what is the big story? The big story is a Guns N' Roses reunion. That's a 35-year-old band that hasn't put out a hit record since 1990. Okay? This may be a story, not to mention the fact everyone said Axl said that he didn't really sing that well, okay? Whereas the biggest pop act is Justin Bieber, and he works with Skrillex. So do we have a problem? Doesn't look like it to me, okay? And I'm not an optimistic guy.
And LCD sound system came back. That was the other expensive reunion.
Right.
They did pretty well. What's your take on this SFX situation? Let's go back to that. Was it a good idea executed badly, or just a bad idea from the outset, you think?
Well, you can't separate the personality from the situation. I mean, what did Sillerman do? You know, he rolled up the concert promoters, and he did what a brilliant businessman will do, in that he laid it off on Clear Channel, which had to take a huge write-off, which then spun it off independently, and Clear Channel Radio, rebranded as iHeartRadio, is loaded up with so much debt that either the lenders will blink to keep it alive or it will go bankrupt. Okay? So that's what happened there. Sillerman walked away. Sillerman, you know, had a couple of other deals with the Elvis estate, et cetera, but Sillerman also had the deal with a hotel in the Caribbean where he lost all this money. Sometimes promoters run out of luck. So it's, you know, Sillerman's right-hand guy, Shelley, he's good entertainment, but he knew as much about dance music as your grandfather. Okay? This was a business proposition from day one.
I knew about boxing. That's quite similar.
And people want to get rich. So there are a certain number of people who sold out to Sillerman, and there are other people who kicked the tires and said the deal was bad. We also had a situation where what is, as they say in the oil business, what is peak oil? What is peak festival? How many festivals can we have? If you follow the country music business, we know that they've canceled a number of festivals this year. There are different theories on this. One is that these acts have been touring so constantly that people have seen them. But we do know at some point, there's a certain number of festivals that the markets can sustain. So a slight correction there is no problem. But if you go back to Coachella, I just remember, this goes back to probably the same year we did the IMS in the desert. The headliner was Radiohead. Radiohead farts and there's news, okay? You know, now Radiohead is angry. They're saying Brian Message is not really their manager, so there's a new album, whatever. If you were at that show, my cameraman saying, I got to get a little bit more in this way. So if you're at that show, and you know Coachella, there's one main stage, there's a side stage, and then there's the tents, okay? Started off full, and everybody left because they wanted to go see Cascade. If they eliminated the dance tents at Coachella, the event would be over, okay? So the audience still wants this. Also going on to what Mr. Medved said, today's musical instrument is not the guitar. Not that I have a problem with the guitar. It is the electronic thing. Things are good. Things are moving forward. It's a perception problem.
Okay. After that, we took you to Ibiza a few years ago. you had a good time. You wrote about it a lot. It seems to enhance your view about electronic music even more. Can America still learn from Ibiza? Do you think it's less relevant now, given what's happened here in the last 5 years?
You say if Ibiza is whether it's war?
No, do you think Ibiza is still relevant? Can it still have an influence on America? Do you think there's still things to learn?
Let's start with society at large. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on. Okay. We had Donald Trump saying the unsayable. He was supposed to be a joke. He will probably be the Republican nominee. I happen to be Jewish, but we have an old Jew from Vermont who's challenging the establishment. Nobody knows anything. Okay? So therefore, when you know, who do we trust? There was a story in Monday's New York Times talking about all the news companies are challenged because where are all the eyeballs? So is it if the New York Times prints it? Is it if Billboard prints it? Is it if Pitchfork prints it? As I was talking about the EDM scene 3 or 4 years ago, I said, if it dies, everybody inside will be the last to know. Because what will happen is the people at home will look at each other and say, I don't need to go. Okay? So it is great that there's an epicenter for dance music in the Balearics. That is the homeland. It's like going to Jerusalem. Okay, you go there, and it's been there forever. So people don't dream about going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but they say, "Oh, I want to go to Ibiza. I want to stay up all night." So I think that is forever. So you have things waxing and waning. Okay, when you're somewhere between the age of 18 and 27, you want to have a peak experience where you can cut loose, and everybody knows anything goes there. And I really see this as a perception issue, just like when they tried to kill disco in '79. Then subsequent to that, Donna Summer had her biggest album of all time. So,
okay, I've got to segue into this question now. I've been dying to ask you this. Don't you think it's odd that it took Mike Posner to write the lyric, "I took a pill in Ibiza to show Avicii I was cool"?
What part are you asking is odd?
Well, shouldn't we have come up with that? After all, we've been taking them for years, so well, not me personally, but
No.
It took Mike Posner to probably come up with the greatest dance lyric of all time since Prince. Or maybe, Superstar DJ, Let's Go or something.
Let's separate it and just make it about Mike Posner. Okay, Mike Posner is a guy with a little success and then nothing, which is very typical of today's marketplace. It's almost like a one-hit wonder thing, but because of social media, everyone can see you failing. So what this guy did was...
He's probably never been to Ibiza, by the way. I'm pretty sure he hasn't.
No, it happened there. He said it actually happened. Now, that is the point of my story. There's nothing worse... than having one or a couple of hits because you can't go back to work in the factory. Well, I'm the guy who had the one hit that everybody knows. Okay? So this guy is wandering around, and Avicii was the DJ, and somebody gave him a pill. This is all a real story. And he took the pill, because he didn't want to say no. It's like a rock star taking cocaine in the 70s when somebody provides it. Oh, yeah, you don't do the cocaine? And then he felt like such a shithead that he wrote an album about it. And the album, everybody here's probably heard the original track. You haven't heard the original track?
Yeah, now we have, yeah.
Okay, the original track is an acoustic track, which is not a hit track. It's it's the same thing, and it's an honest thing. The reason it connects, the reason why this record for me is such a huge record is the track, if you listen to the lyrics, is completely honest. But going back to the theme of today's program, which is EDM faltering, you get some DJs from fucking nowhere, okay, who lay a track and make it the biggest track in the world, okay, and make it much better than the first thing. This is what if we go to rap music, okay, everybody decided, okay, first they were ripping off the samples. Then they charged too much, so now rap music is a completely different sound than it was 15, 20 years ago. In electronic music, the remix culture is a good thing. These guys didn't steal Mike Posner's song, they elevated it. So I believe having the title of the location benefits society at large in the EDM world, but I think it was successful just because he was giving his honesty, and then they sought out DJs to do a remix. But I'm not quite. I can't believe I'm the optimistic guy today, but I'm not quite as cynical as you, as I think it's great. Anybody who's in the entertainment field knows that your one big break is never your one big break. Okay, you do something, you get on television, you go, this is it. It's going to happen now. I'm going to go. And it doesn't. And then the thing that you were never going to do and someone drags you to, you do that and that blows you up. So I think there's a real benefit, yes, for dance music culture, dance music, and Ibiza, but it was one of those pure serendipitous moments that would happen one time and it happened.
I wasn't being cynical. I was kind of, what I was getting at was, as big as that record is, wouldn't it have been amazing if, like, Calvin Harris had said that, or David Guetta or Avicii, or how much bigger could it have been? But we probably wouldn't do it because I think they're so preoccupied with probably fitting into top 40 radio. But
well, I agree with everything you're saying, but I would go deeper. It's just like anybody. It's just like the music business at large. Who was the revolution of the music business? Some guy going to college in Boston. I was sitting with Daniel Ek yesterday from Spotify, and you listen to him, his headspace is completely different from the label things. So it's the same type of thing. If you're really deep in a specific culture, it's always an outside force that blows it up.
I love it. You're a massive champion of a great song. I love it when you get worked up and write these long blogs about, or you almost dissect a song. You got very excited about Love Yourself with Bieber. What did you make of him working with Skrillex and Diplo?
I mean, if we want to have a Bieber story, Bieber, I think we can accept the story as billed in that they found him on YouTube and they build him up. And just like everything else in this world, you can't replicate these things ad infinitum. Go back to Radiohead, they had Name Your Own Price. That was something that could be done once. And now everybody wants to be discovered on YouTube, okay? But then we had to listen to the endless hype how talented Bieber was, which he is not. Okay. Randy Phillips used to be the promoter at AEG. Oh man, he plays the drums, he plays guitar. It's like, Randy, you gotta shut the fuck up. I mean, he's just a teenager. Okay. Then he's egging houses. He's getting caught, with the issue with the dope going into Canada. There's the Lamborghini in Miami, whatever. So on some level, this is a great resuscitation. And then also you have his manager. Okay. The manager did a roll up like Sillerman, sold it to Wall Street. As a very powerful friend of mine said, this ruined it for the business at large because who's going to lend money after Scooter burned these guys? So it looked like it was down, but the change in culture is important. If you go back to classic rock, which is dead, what we have to remember is we are in the year 2016. This came up on Fox News. I'm a big left-winger, but I listen on the satellite where they broadcast it. And George Bush, the second Bush, the president, he went to a coffee shop, and the waitress then tweeted, "Hey, George Bush was here. He started 9/11," and all the right wingers were freaking out. And then they said, "It's 2016. That girl was 5 years old in 2011 in 9/11. She has no idea." So we have, especially on the recorded music end, we have a lot of old farts still in play. And the classic rock era invented the rock thing, invented rock promotion, et cetera, et cetera. But most people making music today have no frame of reference there too. It's like American Idol in America. That was the Mariah Carey paradigm. Belt it out. Okay, Mariah Carey was 1990, 1991. That's 25 years ago. Okay. So the collaborative culture is very different from the rock culture. The rock culture is I'm alone, okay? So in this particular case, when Scooter's making a record with Bieber, and Bieber doesn't, he knows he needs a great record, he goes out to collaborate with all these people, he comes up with something that is really a great story. But this is kind of akin to country music. Because of royalty issues, now the difference is DJs, they can go out and make a lot of money playing live. But if you're in Nashville and you're writing the songs, you give it to Luke Bryan because he's the number, or Carrie Underwood, because they're the number 1 and 2 people who will have success and you want to make money. So on some level, if you're Justin Bieber, you have your pick of the best people. So you have a collaborative effort, but one of the great things about it is, don't we all hate Justin Bieber? Okay, he's like, it's the worst. It's an empty suit. But we all know a hit record. So in this particular case, I feel good about myself. I was honest enough to admit it. That, first of all, no one knows. It used to be, prior to the internet era, there was a chart in Billboard. We can argue how accurate, but everybody in the music business knew every record. Okay? They may not have heard it, but they go, oh, yeah, I know that. Now, the number one record, people may not be aware of because there's so much stuff out there. So I try to keep current with the Spotify thing, and that track just jumped out.
I think what I was getting at was that one of my favorite books I read recently was The Song Machine by John Seabrook, which celebrates an era of, pop is a producer's medium and how, the stargates of this world and Max Martin and Dennis Pop rule. In the same way, I wonder if people will write that about Skrillex and Diplo and Calvin and David Guetta, because they have actually been doing that. They've been ruling top 40 radio for the last years, largely by what they do as producers. So it's probably another thing that EDM, electronic music, has a chip on its shoulder about.
Exactly. But the thing is, the little girls understand, to quote Willie Dixon. It's only the mainstream that doesn't understand, because these are not people that they want to sell. Until Taylor Swift dated Calvin Harris, no one who wasn't a dance music fan had any idea who Calvin Harris was in America.
We just had our first major retirement as well, with Avicii announcing, probably through health problems and he couldn't handle touring anymore, and he's kind of retired. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. Maybe he heard the Mike Posner song. But we got burnout. We got burnout in our industry.
My favorite story on this is the Scorpions, the hard rock band. They're on their third farewell tour in America. But before they went on the second one, they had to schedule it around the fact the next album was coming out.
Yeah.
There's nobody in the history of the music business, from Frank Sinatra today, who ever really retired. I don't want to go on the road. DJs, it's like being a comedian. The revenue is just unbelievable. Maybe you travel, now with a laptop, maybe a road manager, and other than paying your agent, you make all the money. But
it's hard to get sympathy, right?
No. It's not hard to get sympathy. There's a lot of money that's hard to turn down. And when you're hot, your phone blows up. But, when you're 20 years old, you're dying to go on the road because of the drugs, the alcohol, and the sex. But if you go back to the classic rock band thing, most rock bands don't make it overnight. They play the arena where everybody thinks they're God. They get their dick sucked in the dressing room, and then they get on the bus with the same 4 fucking assholes they knew from high school. Okay? And they can't sleep at night. They do drugs just to cope. Okay? So I'm sure Avicii hit a wall. Unless he has a specific health problem, which people do have, cancer, some other thing, he will definitely be back. It's just a way of saying, don't fucking call me.
I think it was Jägermeister. Anyway, another one of your pet subjects that I love reading you about, because you've been quite a visionary on this subject, is, and the most recent quote from you was, "You need to be on Spotify," which was really your rant about maybe it's not about YouTube anymore. So where do you think we are in the streaming world?
Well, we have to start with Adele. Now, what a bullshit story that was. Okay, in that everyone knew the track. Hello, no one knows another track. If you read the Wall Street Journal story, they did analysis. Mostly the album was bought by housewives. Okay, so what is the cultural impact of the music on that record? Not high. Now, I'll go one step further. Taylor Swift, who arguably had the biggest record in America for the last couple of years, 1989, everybody knows Shake It Off, but people don't necessarily know the other tracks. The point is, obscurity is your enemy. Remember talking to Troy Carter, who used to manage Lady Gaga, and we were discussing this. In music today, if you were one of the ultimate artists, there's more money in adjusted dollars than ever before. Can you make as much money as a tech person? Can you make as much money as a banker? No. Now, culturally, one of the problems is people then cozy up to these fucks because they want to make a little bit more money. Where the power of an artist is speaking truth to power. I mean, that's one of the things I love about the Posner song. At least he's speaking his own truth, whether it may or may not be political, because you're not getting a truth in a tube of toothpaste or a bottle of gin. So you have to be able to be heard. One thing that there's been good reportage on, but not necessarily great, is we are totally in a mobile world. Everybody sees things mobile. YouTube music is not available in every market. Like in Germany, I believe you don't get YouTube music, etc. But YouTube's a shitty experience on the handset. So ultimately, you have the two things. Streaming services are built for the handset, and you have to be available, and you have to be on the playlist. So.
Yeah, I was going to say to you, I mean, I've spent my whole life in radio as well, and for the first time, I'm almost getting plugged harder to put something on my Spotify playlist than actually play it on the radio. So what does that say about where we're at?
Well, that's an interesting thing, because radio was king until MTV, and then radio completely changed format to a top 40 format that MTV did, and MTV led. So if you compare the media base charts, the media base is the Bible of radio spins, to the Spotify charts, it's like mind-bending. I mean, media base can be as much as a year behind, okay? So I believe that there ultimately is one service that dominates, because that's the nature of the internet, Amazon, Google, etc. But we're in an era of chaos. But it's like sitting with Daniel Ek yesterday. He was talking about, did Adele make a good decision? Well, financially, maybe for her she did. And there's some small artists. But what we know is time is passing, in that we live in a streaming world now. And being in the top chart of the streaming world, I mean, listen, what kind of fucked up world do we live in where they still print the sales chart in the newspaper? When was the last time other than vinyl, when was the last time anybody in this room bought a CD or a track? In the last month, anybody do that?
I bought a track.
Okay, it's like that's not what's going on. And also, I love it. When somebody sent me a track yesterday, and I get a lot of email, whatever. So, but this guy's still sending me an MP3. Even this idiot knows to link to YouTube. So we're definitely in a streaming world, and the streaming is ahead. But these are battles that we've been fighting. We've been fighting the battle of the international release date, which we made a lot of progress on. Will it speed up? I believe yes. The question becomes, this is the next thing, is what is the longevity of a track? Because it takes so long to make it to radio that the tracks can be the better part, like the Fetty Wap track. It took like 9 months, if not longer, okay? And that leaves a lot of new tracks either out or in the queue. And that's bad for the music at large.
So where do you think top 40 radio's at, or where do you think radio's at as a medium? Would you be investing, opening stations, or closing them?
Well, okay, there's a lot of subjects there. Financially, absolutely not. In radio, we live in an on-demand culture. No one wants to wait for anything. Radio is inherently waiting. Traditional, over-the-air radio. But radio is a consolidation, anointment medium, and at this point is still the most powerful way to say, yes, these are the records. In terms of radio at large, the only thing that counts is top 40 radio. The problem with the music industry, both the people who are pushing the buttons and the people who are trying to get in, is they want the old days. They want all genre music to count. If you want to be horrified, go to the rock charts, active rock on media base. Go to the sales. They're this fucking big. You can't break through. Top 40, country, and then hip hop, which frequently is top 40. If you're not in those genres and electronic music bleeds together, forget it.
Radio 1's slightly different, but that's in the UK.
Wait. Tell me what you're saying.
Well, Radio 1 in the BBC in the UK is slightly different because it's kind of populist public service radio. So we're not answering to advertisers, and it doesn't revolve quite so much around top 40. But so its mission is to still introduce new music, but it's an anomaly in the world at large.
Okay, but if I'm in England, okay, and I walk down the street and I stop someone, they know all the hit records. People follow it like the horse races. Yeah. But they don't do in America. Do you think that we can get people in America to be interested in that way?
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's maybe Spotify is actually starting to do some of that now, or the the Tidals or the Pandoras. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, how are Apple doing? You've always been the number one fan. What do you think of Beats One as a radio service? You said Apple a challenge now for sure.
Apple, the corporation, is challenged because there's no vision and there's no innovation. But one thing I did not know until I talked to Daniel Ek yesterday is he believes, because I don't believe, that the number of subscribers at Apple Music is accurate. But what he told me, which I did not know.
And what are they?
Excuse me?
What are the numbers?
11 million, is it 11 or 13 million worldwide subscribers? Is that two things. One, if you have a family subscription, everybody is counted as a subscriber. And about 25% of the numbers are that. Whereas that is also the average age of the user is 30-something, where he gave me the exact number, I just don't remember. Whereas the average user of Spotify is a younger thing. So he didn't have an answer, but we were speculating. A lot of people say, oh, I buy Apple products. That's an older mentality. Okay. I find Apple's interface unusable. Okay. I think that, Spotify is not perfect, but it's unusable. It's run by Jimmy, who's a very smart guy, but is totally old school. He's going with these exclusives, et cetera. Okay. So if you're asking me the landscape of streaming services, what we know is Audio already bit the dust, okay? Deezer, it's a matter of when, although they're trying to change their strategy to have video and other things. Tidal's a fucking joke, okay? They're just waiting. I'm not talking about the quality. It's great, when Aspiro owned it and it was, had its previous iteration.
They got a bit of a spike with Kanye and Rihanna holding off on the other services, but anyway, go on.
Wait. You got a smile?
They got a bit of a spike,
Wait, but what do we know? You can sign up for free. You can sign up for a very brief period. It's just like, I believe baked into the Apple numbers are still people in new territories getting 3-month free subscriptions. It's like if you look at the Sirius XM numbers, which just hit 30 million, okay, a certain number of those are free subscriptions baked into the cars. So, and you saw that someone, I don't want to get too into these lawsuits things, but someone sued Kanye for not being exclusive on Tidal.
Okay. Do you listen to Beats One? Do you listen to the radio service?
I think Beats One is ridiculous.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
So Bob's crystal ball. Who's going to win then? Next 5 years?
Oh no, Spotify definitely gets 60 or 70% of the market. But going back to Beats One, you're a DJ. What do you think about the amateur DJs on Beats One?
I don't know about it. Well, Zane's on there. He's not an amateur.
No. He's the kingpin. We all feel good about him. But they're billing all these other people who come out and spin records. You're a DJ.
I don't listen.
And you don't listen.
I listen to Zane sometimes.
Okay. Because it's a profession. Everyone thinks they can do it. You've been doing it for decades. You know how to do it. So we expect people to listen. There was a huge hype about it. And then we never heard another thing. I don't listen either.
Okay. So who is going to win in the next 5 years? I'm conscious of time. In the business of wider entertainment, who are you backing to succeed?
I mean, that's an interesting question. Are we talking corporations? Are we talking?
Yeah, in the widest sense, is it Netflix? Is it Spotify? Is it Lucian Grange? I loved your April Fools about running Amazon, because even though I knew it was April Fools, by the time I got to the end of the sentence, it was actually totally believable that actually might happen. So,
well, and also, of course, this week's news that you can buy Prime Video and Prime mailing service by the month. I don't know if everybody here uses these. There's a show that won the Golden Globe on Amazon Video called Mozart in the Jungle. It's pretty good. Okay. So you only need a certain amount of original content so that, yes, I'm a big better on Amazon. Okay. Let's just talk technology companies. We have the four horsemen. We have Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple. They all do something slightly different. In terms of retail, Amazon owns it. There's a trust factor, even if it's not the cheapest price. If you follow Amazon closely, what they do is they have AWS, it's Amazon Web Services, where they even host Netflix, which is just crazy, okay? And they they started, this is the music business doesn't get this. You want to get everybody involved. They started at an unbelievably low price and then went down. Microsoft is trying to compete. So Amazon is great. If you follow Facebook, Facebook's great advantage is they figured out mobile advertising. They are the kings of mobile advertising. Google is making progress, but they're behind the 8 ball. Because on the mobile, you don't search Google. Everyone uses apps, certainly statistically, however, anybody individually uses that here. In terms of Apple, there's no vision. They certainly have a large position in the iPhone. People are focusing too much on the finances. But we know this guy died. I don't know if anybody read the obituaries. You got to read them. You got to read this Ken Auletta piece in the New Yorker about this guy, Bill Campbell, okay? Bill Campbell was a guy who, they call him the coach. He was literally a football coach at Columbia, and the team was bad. If you know your football, that's literally the worst team of all time. They just can't win. And then he got involved in technology. He was a marketing guy at Apple. He ran into it. He was the guy they called whenever there was a crisis. They were going to fire Jeff Bezos in the late 90s. If you follow the numbers at Amazon, they should have maybe. But Campbell was a big believer in founders. That's what our business is based upon. Everybody is a crazy fuck who couldn't work anywhere else. Okay? If you can get along, you don't have a vision, etc. So he believes in founders, but he teaches them how to get along. They intentionally squeezed out Marissa Mayer, neutralized her at Google because she couldn't get along. And the people who hired her at Yahoo were too stupid to know that. The guy Andy Rubin, who came from Apple, who started Android at Google, he basically would only work with his people. They squeezed him out. So the point is, you want to have the founder, but you want to teach them how to get along at this point. Apple is just run by a guy who's an efficiency expert, Tim Cook. So what do we know? This is my personal theory, that we, in the music business, it's all worked out. We were the canary in the coal mine. Streaming won. For the first time in 16 years, it's about the music. We are going in that direction because David Lowery, Melissa Farrick, they sue Spotify. That's just a fucking sideshow. I mean, who cares about that? We live in an on-demand culture. You can get everything in music, okay? Same thing in tech. Okay, first it was MySpace, then it was Facebook. Now we have Instagram, Snapchat. We're going to have a hip social network. I don't see the big revolution. The future of the next 10 years is content. In terms of in terms of concert promotion, et cetera, what we know is the difference is Live Nation is a public company. It used to be you had to keep the promoter in business. You were screwing the promoter, but if you had a big loss, you would give money back to the promoter. People don't give money back to Live Nation. They occasionally ask, like Live Nation occasionally asks for it. Live Nation is a deep pocket that people like, okay? In terms of Ticketmaster, Ticketmaster's got the old spaghetti code, but nothing sells tickets as well as Ticketmaster. So Live Nation is here to stay. You know, SFX is in disarray. Beatport will be sold. Something will be happening. The AEG's plan is different. You know, like the old movie, Live Nation is engulf and devour. AEG is all about like LA Live downtown, as opposed to necessarily conquering everything, and everyone knows at some point it will be sold. So I think Live Nation is, you know, like these other dominant tech companies, is the big company.
And you're quite pro on A&R again, so the labels do okay if they sign the right stuff, because content is king.
Content is king. This, you know, I'm supposed to ask him questions. Every time I go, he keeps throwing me some questions. But the point is that we've learned a lot of things over the last 15 years. We learned he who has assets has leverage. The record company's assets are their catalog. We learned, like we talked about DJs, being a professional, being knowledgeable is key. Just because you can make a record and put it on Spotify and Apple doesn't mean anyone will listen to it. Record companies have relationships, okay? And they can use those relationships to get you exposed. And it's so hard to get exposed that people, as one act once emailed me, goes, tell me where to sell out. I'm dying to sell out. I've been struggling for 10 years. So you can do it independently, but it's a much harder row to hoe. But the only difference is when the baby boomers go and they got 10 years max, Music business is going to look completely different. Baby boomer, I mean, millennial likes to make money, but he believes in transparency. So all this royalty shit, et cetera, is going to change. But in live performance, the performers get the lion's share of the money anyway.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. I've got one last question for you, though, right?
Okay.
Because another theme of your writings is you look at something like the situation at Apple, and then you often take the lessons from it and bring it back to the music business. So what can we learn in the music and entertainment business from the current election process?
I think I touched upon it earlier. First and foremost, the rules will bite you in the ass. Okay? If you're not willing to be transparent, if you're not willing to be equal, you're the one. Let's start from the beginning. Hillary Clinton made the rules with Debbie Schussel from the Democrat Party. We don't want the debates on Saturday night because no one will watch them, okay? And then Bernie got traction elsewhere, worked against them. The New York Times says, we're, the arbiter of truth. They didn't cover Bernie. Bernie ultimately became powerful. Both Bernie and Trump are speaking to the public. Trump is upending the Republican wisdom. The Republican wisdom is, we feed them religion, tell them hate gay marriage, hate the black people, et cetera, and then we play to the rich. And homie, don't play that anymore. Okay, income inequality is an issue on the right. On the left, this is a great analysis. They said, they're never going to elect Bernie because he's a socialist. And someone in one of the major publications said, Fox News has been beating up Obama for so long for being a socialist that socialist doesn't even mean anything anymore. And that's true. Look at how much traction that Bernie got. The other thing is the media is not in touch with what the public wants, okay? In terms of what the public wants, I mean, the average person is a big electronic music fan, maybe not even know. If you go on because Love Yourself, okay, I went on the Wikipedia page, and they broke down, because you go back to Seabrook's book, which is a good book, okay, The Song Machine, and he said how they make the records. You get the beat maker, you get the top line person, et cetera, et cetera. If you listen to Love Yourself, you say, there's a million hooks, there's a million elements, and you go on the webpage, say, well, there's dance hall, reggae, there's this. The average person doesn't know all that. They know they like the song. So they know, this is the sound that they want to hear. People want to believe in things. People want to believe in stars. So the problem has become is for the last, certainly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, entertainment drove the culture. But the most exciting story has been the election in the last year. And everybody knows whoever gets elected, not much is going to change. We're just loving the horse race, loving the truth, loving people getting their asses kicked. And where are the musicians? This is like the North Carolina thing, okay? Jimmy Buffett, who has all the money, he's going to play, okay? But then you have, Pearl Jam, Ringo, et cetera, we're not going to stay. It's about taking a stand. When a musician takes a stand, he pisses off a few people, but the people who believe in that stand and believe in the musician, they go with him, and a musician can be a leader.
That's what we learn. I think time for some questions from the floor quickly. Have we got a microphone out there?
Questions? No questions?
I know it's early. We've got one down the front.
Gentleman in the front.
Grab him.
Hello. Part of me thinks that if the Billboard charts are irrelevant, that the Spotify charts are just, if not already, are kind of like the new Billboard charts. Just want to know what you thought about that.
Yes.
Cool.
First of all, the Billboard chart is manipulated. Their actual sales, and then they add up a number of streams to make a record. This is what's wrong. What they do in tech is they write away the past. This is what Steve Jobs did. We're getting rid of the floppy. Okay, we're going to new technology. So streaming won, but they have to do something for the labels, they do something for the retailers, and they end up with a chart that's just meaningless.
Billboard are here. They're very nice.
Listen, I said it in print. I know the guys who run the magazine. Yeah. Fuck them.
You said EDM has a perception problem and a brand problem. Wondering how much of that do you think is the responsibility of the more EDM press and blogs and things like that versus the mainstream media?
The mainstream media is the ass of the donkey, or maybe that's actually an ass, but it's the rear end of the donkey, okay? But the inside, what do we know? Whenever there's discord on the inside, it gets reported on the outside. So everybody was so eager to A, have Sillerman fail, B, to talk about certain nightclubs in Vegas failing, okay, that this seeped out into the world at large. So his art is historically not organized. But if everybody get in the room here and say, from now on, we're not going to, I'm not telling you to do this because it's not kind of group thing, but say, we're not going to talk shit, we're only talk positive. Within 12 to 18 months, we say, oh man, electronic music gets healthy because you guys are driving it, okay? But instead it became purely about the money. It became about money and death. Okay, where is the encyclopedia of dance music? What you guys love, that the outsiders are outside. Okay, so the outsider says, "Oh, I like dance music," and you say, "Well, do you know the difference between house and trance and all this?" And they don't know. You're not a big tent welcoming people in. It's like reluctantly. Did you listen to enough music? Did you go to enough shows? Okay, maybe. You don't want it to be a big tent. It's the opposite of disco with gay people because gay people were outsiders to begin with. You've been outsiders for so long that you said, fuck them, and now when you think people are walking away, you say, no, come back, come back.
Hey, Bob. My name's Hushem. I'm from here in LA. If Sillerman gave you the keys a year ago to SFX along with a big enough check, what would you have done differently?
It was flawed on the beginning. Because if you follow the tax things and the purchase price and the stock, there were a lot of A players who would not make that deal and B players who were in trouble. The other thing was, yes, you were competing against the run-up, of how many festivals they had. I think that's just not who I am. Because anybody who's rolling something up who, is usually just trying to get to sell it. No one ever thought that this guy wanted to really be in dance music. Whenever he talked about it, he didn't seem to know what was going on. So in some industries, there are roll-ups and the established players want to continue to play. I think the model was flawed from day one. I don't think it was savable. It's like Yahoo. Can't save Yahoo.
There you go.
Hi, I've really enjoyed listening to your talk this morning. Thank you both. I have a question about age demographics. So if generation...
Wait. What do you do?
I'm a filmmaker.
Okay.
But I have a question about the dance music audience and age demographic. Because you mentioned about the baby boomers cycling out. So when Generation X, or the first generation who really were there in the inception of dance music, when we step up, are we a more important demographic than millennials? That's a question I'd be interested.
You're talking about Generation X, Y, or Z?
Well, X.
X is the people right after the baby boomers.
Right.
So then you're saying, no, the X was always in the shadow of the baby boomers, felt like both their cultural chances and their monetary chances were ripped off. They were smaller in numbers of baby boomers. They're in the rearview mirror. Fuck it, okay? So millennials rule in sheer numbers, and then Generation Z after that.
So X is not going to step up because baby boomers are going to be...
Wait, no. Step up and do what?
Well, as far as driving content consumption with the fact that Generation X is the inception of the dance music, electronic music world coincided with our evolution to a certain extent. So
I could get into a deep cultural analysis, but I'm not.
Okay.
The bottom line is baby boomers either run companies, this is across America, or they're on their last legs. Will people 10 to 15 years younger have power? Yes. I don't think it's necessarily relevant to break it down. There are free thinkers in every market. Free thinker Gen Xers, can they succeed? Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
No, I'm going to ask you a couple questions.
No, okay. No, come on, that's my question. Thought I got away with it.
The gentleman back there, or lady,
Go on,
I can't
one
say.
more there.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen. I'm from Los Angeles. I'd like to pose a question for our distinguished guest. It's under my intuition and feeling that Skrillex is a very important artist, and I think he's overlooked in many ways. In fact, considering his style and his uniqueness, I think he actually invented and created the paradigm that's going to actually resonate for the rest of the 21st century. What is your opinion of this? And I would like to hear a response.
Skrillex is a nice guy who's a very successful artist. I mean, it sounds like you either worked with him or blew him or something. But
That's not the answer I want.
My point is, I'm just trying to say.
That wasn't a point. That was a comment.
He's a guy who came from the punk world. He got caught up in the dubstep,
He invented dubstep.
That's not true.
That is no, he did that.
You need to come to East London. Hang out with me and scream.
Wait. I do not.
He wouldn't even try and say that.
I'm saying that right now to you.
No, I do not. What you were wanting to do is write history and categorize. For me, Skrillex, Sonny's a nice guy.
We love him.
It has nothing to do with me.
No. The more interesting thing is he has found a way to continue and survive. Okay? That is a true artist, and I compliment him for that. Wait. I'm going to ask, just because I'm going to ask you. You're living in America now.
Yep.
What do you see as the big difference in America as opposed to the rest of the world?
You can't get Sunday lunch. Not in LA anyway, unless you come around my house. What is the big difference? Well, I think it's definitely changed my opinion living here as opposed to visiting here, but actually being in the culture like day in, day out, you start to understand why certain music translates in a certain way. That's for real. I think hip hop culture and the way it's just infiltrated into American society is it doesn't need me to explain it, but that has an effect on everything as well, really, in terms of the way the music's made. It explains a lot about, I think when EDM was peaking a few years ago, we were talking about what's next. The UK had already moved on. You couldn't, the big EDM DJs here weren't really that big in the UK going back like 3 years ago. And the UK was already on to, the next thing that worked there, whether it's Disclosure or Rudimental. And maybe in America, everyone would have thought, well, that's obviously going to be what follows here, but it actually hasn't. And I think you have to live in America and be in America every day to kind of understand why that wouldn't necessarily be the case. And that's why I think it's an exciting time now that I don't know what you're going to call it, but whether it's trap or whether it's whatever it's called, there will be something else, I think, now that will be indigenous, that will be local, that will come from here, that will be influenced by everybody and everything, but it will be unique.
Do you think what comes out of America will ultimately influence the rest of the world?
Well, in a way, people like Skrillex have already, and he is a good example of a kind of byproduct of living in America. I mean, he came into our world from, as you said, a kind of emo band, and he's come in with his expertise and his curation and his point of view, and he's messed it up, and I mean that in a good way, not messed it up in a bad way. I mean, he's just got in there and kind of done his interpretation of it, and because he's like a virtuoso. And that enabled him to do what he's done. I'm just as intrigued that he's the executive producer on Bieber's album as the music he's making. I think that's super smart, and it's great. But
and if you had your magic wand and you wanted to expand the footprint of electronic music in America, what would you do?
Well, make better records. I think that would help, or keep making great records and encourage great records to get made. I think we're going to go through, encourage probably more boutique festivals now and actually try and keep clubs open, because I think clubs are where experimentation happens. There's not as much at stake, and I don't mean Vegas clubs, but I mean, maybe, I was doing an interview with the Grammy people yesterday, and it's funny how I grew up coming here. Everything came from here at the beginning. From the '80s of going to Paradise Garage and Danceteria, house music, Detroit. Everything came from here, and it was it didn't really work here. It worked in a couple of cities, but it influenced the rest of the world. So maybe now we just need to. Maybe some of those things can work in America. Finally, it would have happened in reverse. I use that analogy a lot as well. In England, kids got into dance music by going to their local club, meeting their local DJ, hanging out with their friends. They got more and more friends. That became more of a kind of weekly ritual. And eventually, a few people, after 10 years, 15 years, like Cream, managed to do a bigger festival where we could all hang out together. And it started small and it got really big. Whereas here, so often the first experience of electronic music came from, I hear, Avicii on the radio, and I go and see him at EDC, and my first thing is like I'm walking into 150,000 people, and then I get hooked on that for a while, and then maybe I spin out of it, or maybe I grow up and want to go to clubs or whatever. But it's kind of just briefly in the last looking at the last 5-6 years, that's how it's happened in America. So
now, in terms of the music, do you think it's about what we've had recently in terms of the DJs coming to pop and making pop records, or is it about getting the audience deeper into the genres of electronic music?
I think, say that question again.
What I'm trying to say is, you say it's dependent. We want to make better records. Do you see those as being better pop records or better records? There's certainly a lot of dance records that are successful solely in the dance.
Yeah, I'd like to see us. I mean, whether we'll ever get back to the time of people making great albums, we know that's another debate. But I think that in the UK, after the first kind of wave of acid house and the whole rave scene, from that came the Prodigy, came the Chemical Brothers, came Orbital, came Groove Armada, Basement Jaxx, and we had a bunch of bands that then headlined our festivals and kind of led the way all the way through the 90s. And I think that will that happen in the US? Well, are we about to go into that era? Possibly. The Billboard guy talked earlier about the fact that people are more comfortable to get up and actually perform now, like Odessa. I don't know if you've seen them live. That's something that the US should be proud of. Because they never really stood behind turntables. And it's ironic that someone like Calvin Harris, when he started and he was playing with us in Liverpool, the first time he ever got up to perform, he was the lead singer of his own band, and he was very uncomfortable in that role. I thought it was kind of shame at Coachella that he didn't bring a bit of that back in. Maybe he will one day. But he converted to being a DJ because he was more comfortable, even though he really could do the other things. So I think what we're seeing now with Odessa and Gallant's kind of, I don't know if he's almost just about in the world of electronic music, but I would like to see that we're going into an era of performance now, and encourage there to be bands. And
one of the big challenges, the elephant in the room, which I made reference to a little bit, is drugs and dying. Is that, in terms of, because we've canceled events in Southern California, do you think it's an addressable problem, a solution? Or it's a sideshow, which it doesn't appear to be? How does one move forward in that?
I'm not the best person to ask. Probably James and Lee Anderson who are coming up next. But I don't know. I think a bit like you've written before that drugs aren't just something that's associated with electronic music. All forms of music have had interactions with drugs. So I think it's always about you manage it as well as you can. And most importantly, one thing that we've done brilliantly in the UK is obviously communicating about and making information available about what you do in certain situations, and just getting as much information out to the audience as possible. There was this terrible situation in Argentina last weekend where like 5 people had died, I think, at a festival. And we were just saying that maybe in the UK that the information would have got out there more in terms of how to handle that. So,
and just be clear, what information and how do you?
I just think if a new drug comes on that's a problem, then actually there's websites. The Radio 1 do a lot of public service stuff in terms of getting the message out about drugs. There's a lot of programs. There's a lot of we constantly inviting the audience to call up and find out if they're concerned about anything like that. And I'm not so sure that happens to that level here.
No, it's like sex in America. You can't talk about it.
Yeah. So.
And what do you see of the future of radio in the UK?
I think it's a battle for sure. I mean, I'm obviously grew up with Radio 1, and that's been a massive part of my life. So I think that they've just got to be on the front foot and at the top of their game. I think they did adapt into the streaming world really early. It's only really licensing issues that have held that up. They are a public service institution, so it's a constant confusion and political debate about whether they should actually bother about anybody listening around the rest of the world. But I certainly hope they survive. But I think that I don't live there now, so I don't know about all the other stations.
Okay, and Pete Tong, you're an empire. You're a DJ, you're an agent, you do all these things. What is your future, and what of all these hats you wear, what is the most important to you?
I think it's still getting up, and finding a great tune. It's always been the simplest thing to me. That's always come first, is my enthusiasm for new music. So I started DJing so long ago that it wasn't considered a job or a livelihood. So I was very lucky that I got into the record business early, because I could do that during the day and DJ at night. And I don't think that's ever changed really. So it's still music discovery, music curation. I'm a great believer, and that's why I like it when you write glowingly about the the old-fashioned A&R skills. I think that's something I was lucky enough to be around in an era where that was king, and I got influenced by a couple of the kind of legendary players in that.
Two connected questions, and then we'll let it go. A, where do you find new music? And B, what do you think the best way to get the public to discover new music is?
I think it's funny, again, I come from an era of DJing where you would run to the record store, you would effectively bribe the owner of the record store, or you want to become their best mate, and it was all about being the only person that had anything, and you tried to keep everybody else away from that record that you got for as long as possible, and that kind of made you cool and made you unique. Completely at the other end of my career, I mean, I'm lucky. I get sent a lot of stuff by people that, it doesn't really matter so much whether you're the first person that has it anymore, because everybody's got access to so much stuff. It's now more about picking the right ones. But I really, really enjoy discovering records on Spotify or on SoundCloud that have actually been out there for 6 months. That
how do you actually find them?
Well, a network of conversations and physical searching still.
Okay, so we all have. This is how I discover. People will email you, or enough people email say, I got to check that out, because there's so much stuff out there. But on do you surf SoundCloud without recommendations? I don't.
Not really, no.
Okay.
I might go looking for something, but I've heard a whiff of.
Right. And Spotify, are there specific playlists, specific areas you go to check out other than the recommendations?
I do at the moment, because I'm trying to educate myself about it. I'm here to learn like everybody else, and I think it's fascinating. That is, to me, the biggest change, is that being on a Spotify playlist as important as being on a radio playlist or in the Beatport chart. And that started happening much more regularly in the last 6 months. Is people come in to me and they will say that it is, financially, it's even starting to count to be on a Spotify playlist that's got 2 million followers. Is probably more valuable than being in the Beatport top 10. So for a breaking, emerging electronic artist.
But in terms of your own personal discovery, what playlist do you check out? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you remember.
If I remember, well, obviously my daughters now.
Well, then just go to the final question. What would you do to make it so it would be more understandable and easy for the...
I'll tell you, one other thing I still do is probably the biggest still a massive learning part for me is going to other people's shows and standing there watching them play. So that's actually going back to really old school. So I can't do that all the time, too old to do that all the time now. But when we're at something like BPM, or we're in Ibiza, or we're in Miami where there's millions of DJs playing all in close proximity, just standing with other DJs and actually hearing what they play is just as likely to term, you know, because also you're hearing the music in the proper situation. You know, how many times have you listened to something on Spotify through headphones or computer speakers, thought, nah, and then you hear it a few months later.
Absolutely.
You hear it a few months later when Solomon's playing it, and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So that's a big issue as well of the way we're listening to music. So.
Right. You know, there's a lot of things that's sitting there dormant, as you say, 6 months ago, and all of a sudden it explodes in your brain.
Yeah. And I'm a great fan of the process of making music and appreciate what goes into making music. And I think that's a really fascinating area, again, in terms of where things are going. I think there's a lot of virtuosity in this new generation in America, you know, whether it's from a gaming background or, you know, a lot of these kids really can play. Skrillex really could play, and he really got his head around Ableton. And I remember sitting with him probably 5 years ago in an airport and seeing him work on his laptop on a track. And he was so far ahead of 99% of everybody else that I'd interacted with in terms of the way the sounds he was getting out of it. And I'm seeing that more and more now. And that era of the Kaigos coming through. I mean, the guy's classically trained pianist, you know, and he's a kid, and he really, really can play. So that's setting this generation apart from definitely my generation, where we come from an era where we were just picking other people's records and playing them in the right order, and some of us got quite good at it. But and then the first era, you know, Paul Oakenfold's in the room. Our access to studios was impossible. You had to get someone else to pay for you to go into one, and then hire someone that knew what buttons to press, and then eventually kind of teach yourself. But we're in an era now where people can be self-taught on YouTube, and they're more proud of actually knowing how to make play an instrument. So it's an interesting time.
And since you're associated with WME, if you're a developing performer, DJ, whatever, what is the best way to get noticed and get traction?
Well, aside from making great music, because we run the department like an A&R department in that sense, but get an audience. You know, I'm constantly saying to all the guys I work with, you know, sometimes we talk about something, listen to something, like something, but we've got to get out and see them play as well, because it is an agency that represents people playing live. So I think go out and get an audience, and that's funny enough. That's quite old school, because that's kind of how I started getting noticed, which is actually run a club that's busy, that, you know, you got a bunch of friends, and you get your, you know, the bigger DJ to come down and see you, and suddenly word goes out that you're actually got something going on. So actually generating a crowd and making stuff happen is really, really important as well.
But if you'll talk to
that's what brings me back to the whole thing about running clubs in America. I mean, you've seen those stories go around about millions of nightclubs closing in the UK and stuff like that. But actually, that's where a lot of the creativity happens. So it would be a tragedy if we keep seeing loads of clubs close in the US because, you know, festivals have driven them out of business or something, or people are just, you know, you got to be entertaining and create a reason for kids to go to these places as well.
Well, one good thing for electronic... One more thing and I'm going to go. The one good thing about electronic music is they killed the bands in venues, and it gave a lot of opportunities in the clubs that are still open. But we're way over time. Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.